Join. Okay, so yes, this event is going to be recorded, but we're on speaker view. So unless you speak in the event, you won't appear in the recording. So yeah, hi. So you probably all know who I am, but if anyone's watching back on the recording, I'll just give a little intro before we dive in. So I'm Jo Musker-Sherwood, and after having a pretty spectacular burnout experience running one of the UK's fastest growing climate NGOs, I decided to sort of retrain in the wellbeing space and offer wellbeing support to climate activists or people who are climate concerned. So the idea for this event came because I was recently challenged on a lifestyle choice I made that wasn't particularly environmentally friendly. And I was challenged on the grounds of being, I guess, in some way a climate leader. And it really got me thinking about this question of like, what's good enough in terms of our contribution to the climate crisis, and how often people say, you know, they don't want to be part of it because they feel like they're not good enough and they're not going to be good enough. But then also this very real thing of how much you could call it hypocrisy, or you could call it cognitive dissonance that exists within climate activists. So really wanting to kind of unpick that, and also thinking about how taboo it is to talk still about climate guilt, even amongst the climate concerned. I know that for me, it's something I still really struggle to talk to my friends who aren't climate concerned, because they'll kind of not really understand why it matters to me, and they may feel judged. And then I struggle to talk about it with my friends or networks who are climate concerned, because then I get scared of being judged. So it can be really, really tricky. So the inspiration for this event really was to just kind of crack open that conversation a little bit, make myself vulnerable in terms of the fact that I'm definitely not perfect, and offer a few ways that I have learned to work with my climate guilt that I have found is much better for my mental health. My sense of guilt was a huge part of why I burned out. I felt like I was never doing enough, and it wasn't right to look after myself because there's an emergency going on. And actually that was so kind of detrimental to my well-being. So I had to find different ways of relating to my sense in which I wasn't doing enough. So I thought, though, before we sort of jumped into that it might be a good idea just to take maybe 1 or 2 minutes to do a breath exercise that can bring us into our bodies. Because one of the first things that happens, I've got a bit of a cough, one of the first things that happens is when we kind of get stressed about something, or there's something that comes in that's really activating, and guilt is definitely one of those, is that we go straight up into our heads. And so I'm just going to do a very, very simple breath exercise, take us down into our bodies, a couple of minutes, just to settle ourselves before we go in. So you're welcome to do it or not do it as much as you want. And what I would say, if you get into the exercise and you're like, this is not for me, you can just open your eyes and ground yourself back in the room. For this exercise, just find yourself in as comfortable position as you can. You might want to have kind of your back straight, maybe your feet flat on the floor or crossed. You may even just want to do a shoulder roll if you haven't given your shoulders a roll yet today and it feels comfortable to do so. And when you're comfortable, just take a deep breath in, and as you breathe out, either close or lower your eyes. And we're going to rest our attention onto our breath. So you can pick any part of your body where you would like to rest your attention, where your breath feels most prominent to you. So you may want to focus your attention on where your breath is entering and leaving your nostrils, perhaps on the rising and falling of your chest, or maybe the expansion and contraction of your abdomen. Now, for some of us, when we come into our bodies in this way, we can be met by some unpleasant sensations. And because of the genius of our brains that are wired to notice threat, that can be straight where our attention goes. It can make meditation, breath exercises quite challenging. So as we're just breathing in and breathing out, maybe slowing down our breath a little bit, I invite you to rest your attention on some kind of sensation in your body that feels either neutral or even positive. Scan your body and find something that feels neutral or positive, and rest your attention there for a moment. Really feel into it. You may even want to imagine that you've got a little dial in your mind's eye, and you're going to turn that neutral or positive sensation up a few notches on the dial. Really lean into that sensation. And on your next exhale, let that sensation go. Scan your body and find another sensation, positive or neutral, somewhere else in the body. And a third one, somewhere else, altogether different. And use that dial, turn that sensation up. Bring the fullness of your attention. Get curious. Then when you're ready, in your own time, on your next breath out, gently open your eyes, ground yourself back in the room. Okay, happy doing a neck roll. That feels like a great idea. I'm gonna do one of them. Lovely. If you've got like a word or phrase from the meditation that you want to share with the group about your experience, then feel free to do that. Some people find meditation so easy. I know I find it really hard. I know it's good for me. Yeah, if there's anything from that experience that you want to share, just drop that in the chat. Okay, so structure for this little mini workshop will be here probably for just about another 15-20 minutes. Is I want to spend a little bit of time sharing three reasons why some of our natural approaches to climate guilt don't always work for us very well, and then 3 alternatives. So I mentioned before we went into that breath exercise how easy it is for us to go straight up into our heads when it comes to thinking about climate guilt. So when I'm talking about climate guilt, what I mean by that is wondering about our carbon footprint, wondering about our lifestyle changes, worrying that we're not doing enough, feeling bad and convicted that we should be doing more, wondering what is good enough, and feeling the sense in which we're falling short of that. What happens in that instance is, like I said, we go straight into our heads and into reasoning. And I want to share with you 3 reasons why reasons isn't a great approach to our climate guilt. It makes total sense to go there. I mean, I know when I was challenged on this lifestyle choice, the first place I went to was, well, they don't understand this and this about me. You know, if they'd known this, if they'd known that, I went straight into the detail. And I also went to, oh, maybe they're right. Maybe I need to calculate this or work out that. And I also noticed on the Facebook group that when I posted that question of, you know, what are people working with their climate guilt, is the same thing of going into the detail. Like, I don't know what to do about my car or my recycling or about my meat consumption. And so totally makes sense why we would go to reason and logic to try and work out something, but climate guilt is an emotional problem and an emotional challenge. I shouldn't say an emotional problem, it's an emotional challenge for us to navigate. So I'm going to share my screen with you. 3 reasons why reasons are limited. Okay, so first of all, both nothing and everything is justifiable from a reason perspective. So on the one hand, we can say pretty much anything beyond getting out of bed in the morning is not good for the planet. You know, if we get out of bed and we put our dressing gown on and it's made from cotton, which is really water intensive and labor intensive, and then maybe we go use our toiletries, which have chemicals in them, which isn't good for the planet, and then maybe we go down and have our breakfast, and it's like, well, do we have milk on our breakfast or yogurt, in which case it's dairy? You know, it's just almost everything that is normal in a Western society is not good for the environment. And then when you put that against the backdrop of the fact that so many lives are at risk, instantly it goes sort of so emotionally charged, and that's why these conversations are so emotionally charged. But also, whilst nothing is justifiable, also in some ways everything is justifiable, because you can look at this and go, well, you know, this is the problem of these big systems that we're part of, that have created structural violence, that have created these structural issues. I have virtually no capacity to make a difference in this. What is the point in doing anything? And so along that continuum of reason, we can tie ourselves in knots very, very quickly, which kind of leads on to the other challenge of reason, is that it prevents collaboration. It gets in the way of our relationships. So we will all know people who we look at and think, oh, they live a far more green or eco-friendly lifestyle than I do. And we can either perhaps look at that and feel then bad about ourselves, but we can also look at them and think, you know, well, it's all right for them that they can do those things and have a kind of almost reverse snobbery. And that's, of course, where the privilege thing also comes into place, because those of us with more privilege are able to make lifestyle changes more readily than those who don't. So it can really begin to complicate things very quickly. But as well as knowing people that are probably more eco-friendly than us, we probably know people who aren't, probably all had that experience of thinking, well, I'm making these changes and these sacrifices, but look at what they're doing. And so reason takes us straight away to comparing ourselves. It's all about logic, you know, it's all about kind of making judgments and assessments about things. So it can very quickly begin to get in the way of our relationships. And when you think about the climate movement, it has this kind of reputation of struggling to collaborate and struggling with judgmentalism. And that is exactly the place that reason takes us to. Makes total sense why we would move in that direction, but it creates these real challenges in terms of healthy, authentic, open relationships. And the third thing is that if we are feeling a lot of climate guilt, we're feeling that, oh my goodness, nothing I do is justifiable when you look at the climate emergency, and constantly feeling guilt, that can very quickly turn to shame. And I'll share a little bit about the difference between guilt and shame, and then also blame. So Brene Brown is one of my favorite social researchers, and she says the difference between guilt and shame, in her opinion, is that guilt says, I am a good person who perhaps doesn't always do the things that I want to do, or, you know, that I should do, and I feel guilty about those things. But because I'm a good person, I know I have the capacity to make a difference and to change those things around. Shame, on the other hand, says, I am a terrible person. And because of the gravity and the weight of the climate crisis, we can find ourselves moving into that shame place. I am a terrible person. It's very immobilizing very quickly. So her definition of shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. So this is the real risk for us with our climate guilt, that sense of, I really want to do better, is that it can turn into climate shame, which is, I'm a terrible person because look at the things that I'm doing. Not only is that bad for our mental health and well-being, but it's also incredibly immobilizing. If we think we are a bad person, we give up on trying to do better because we don't believe that we're capable of doing better. So that's why it's not just kind of not good for us, but it's actually not good for the planet when we get into these kind of shame-filled conversations. And I mentioned blame as well. So Brené's definition of blame, you can find all of this in The Power of Vulnerability. It's a great audiobook. Her definition of blame is simply the discharging of pain. So that's where you know, we can be feeling the pain, for example, of our climate grief or our anxiety or anger about the state of the world. And a way of discharging that pain is to point our finger at someone else, or to point our finger at ourselves and to say they're to blame or I'm to blame. And it's a way of regaining control in the situation. If there's someone to blame, there's a way in which it can be fixed. And so it can feel good in the short term, but obviously in the long term, it contributes to this kind of shame culture that can be really detrimental to, to our movement, the climate movement, the environmental movement. So those are sort of some of the pitfalls of, you know, of when we notice ourselves going into, you know, not just, okay, I want to make the decision between this thing and this thing, but actually, oh, I'm tying myself in knots. I don't know which way, which one is right. Why are they doing that over there? Like when we start to feel really activated and we're really struggling to navigate our climate guilt, that's when using our reason can have its limitations. So three alternatives to working with our climate guilt that I'd like to put forward. And if you've got any questions or anything like that, then just do drop them in the chat, and there'll be a bit of space for questions at the end as well. So the first one, working with our climate guilt, is self-compassion. So I actually learned about this. I did some training about privilege and what to do when we realize that we have caused harm through our privilege. And I was sort of thinking, oh, what are they going to suggest, you know, in terms of how we rectify the damage that we've caused through our privilege? And the first thing that they said was take a step back and care for yourself, because you will go into shame, and that drastically cuts down on your ability to be able to show compassion and be there for the person that you've caused harm to. So first step is that self-compassion of, okay, it's hard being a human. I did not choose for climate change to happen. I did not choose to be born into these systems. I did not choose for it to be this way. And I really am doing my best. And I know that I want to do better. So it's stepping into that place of self-compassion as opposed to self-judgment. And in that way, if we're practicing that with ourselves, it's also so much easier to offer that to others. We can get into the habit of thinking, you know, if I say to myself, like, this isn't good enough, then I'll help myself to kind of keep doing better. And again, in the short term, that might work. But as we've talked about, in the longer term, that can just be exhausting, and it can get in the way of our ability to make sustainable changes. So that's the first one, is just taking that time out to acknowledge this is really, really hard. We are living with impossible conundrums. There are so many changes that need to be made so quickly. This is hard, and it's okay to find it hard and to not get it perfect. But of course, we do want to make changes, and we do want to think about how we can kind of have a better relationship with the planet. And this is where I would say, if reason is the place that we go to when we're, you know, getting ourselves in knots about this, what I try to do is think about relationship rather than reason. So reason is kind of, okay, this is how I know I'm getting it right. It's a series of tick boxes. If I reduce this, if I cut that, if I that can be really assuring, but can also have some limitations. And when I'm encountering those limitations, I think about being in relationship. So I think about being in relationship with my carbon footprint. And what matters to me most is my values. Reason, we can tie ourselves in knots, but what are my values? Okay, my values are that I want to bring a certain care to the planet. I want to live in a certain way. And I use those values that I'm in relationship with and my carbon footprint that I'm in relationship with, and I'm learning as I go along how to relate to those things. So in one situation, the outcome might be one thing, and in another very similar situation, the outcome might be another, because I've made a different assessment. So I think about kind of, this is my relationship with the earth, and I'm learning all the time, right? I want to move forward in this particular direction. I don't want to move forward in that particular direction. And that might change depending on the information that I learn, the tools that I gain along the way. I also think about being in relationship with others. So I'm sure I'm not alone in having an experience of kind of, I just recently actually thinking about a group of friends that I was with, and they wanted to do an activity that felt, was very carbon intensive. And I, to not engage with that, I'd be left out. I'd be the only one that didn't do that. And I was thinking, I really, really don't want to be left out. And then the next day I was reading a news story about someone in South Africa who's experiencing climate impacts in terms of drought really badly. And I thought, how could I even contemplate doing that thing with those other people? And that's because we're pack animals and we're constantly in relationship with others. And so our sense of what is right and what is wrong shifts depending on who we're talking to and who we're with. And rather than fighting that in ourselves, we can actually play that to our strengths and be like, right, as I'm making this decision, who am I in relationship with? Who am I centering as I make this relationship? So for me, relationship rather than reason has been a really helpful and more sustainable way of thinking, no, because of my deep love of the planet, or my deep love of other human beings, this is what I choose. And a final thing that I wanted to suggest as a different way forward is authenticity, vulnerability, and joy. So thinking really about how we communicate our lifestyle choices to others. We've got kind of the self-compassion, which is how we communicate with ourselves on our own carbon footprint or climate-related activities. We've thought about how we relate to other people, but how do we communicate our choices to other people? And I know many of us kind of want to play a role of helping other people to make lifestyle changes as well. And how do we do that without shutting people down or making them feel judged? So this is where I cling to authenticity, vulnerability, and joy. So by authenticity, I mean being, real and open about the struggles that we have with trying to live the lifestyles that we want and doing enough, and also about what we don't understand, and the vulnerability as well to say, I wish I was doing more, but also the vulnerability to say to someone, when you made that choice, it left me feeling sad, or it left me feeling, concerned. It felt like it was a conflict with, the values I have for looking after the planet. And so having that kind of courage to be vulnerable with others, and instead of saying you shouldn't be doing this and shouldn't be doing that, it's talking about our own experience of a decision that we might find difficult and sharing that with others. Hi, Vivian. I was just sharing 3 alternatives to using our reason to work out, what's the best thing to do. And there's going to be a replay as well that you can see that on there. So it's just saying, authenticity, being open about the fact that we do not have this all sorted. Vulnerability as a great way of, challenging someone if we're really uncomfortable with the decision that they've made, and saying, oh, it's left me feeling this, that, or the other, and like, can we talk about this? Can we navigate this together? And bringing curiosity to that. And then joy. Being a really key principle for me in terms of how I want to live my life, and thinking about how much the climate movement is based on this idea of scarcity and this idea that it's all about denying ourselves. And it's no wonder that people look at that and think, oh no, I don't want to be part of that. So although that is a key part of things, the joy is about as much as possible saying, actually, what are all the things that we're fighting for to love and out of deep love, wanting to protect, and that bring us joy. And so building kind of as much as possible our lifestyle choices on this idea of this isn't about cutting out X, Y, and Z. This is actually leaning into our love of nature, our love of other people, our love for the planet. I try to cook like the best vegan food that I can when people come round, to really show them the joys of plant-based food, for example, as opposed to kind of wagging my finger, which is sometimes what I want to do. So yeah, those are our three alternatives. I'll just recap again. Limitations for reason. Pretty much we could tie ourselves in knots straight away using our reason, trying to figure out what the best thing is. If we're in our heads, we're thinking about comparison and making assessments, so it can prevent collaboration in that way, because we're constantly kind of judging ourselves and assessing ourselves against others, and it can move us into shame and blame, which is not what we want to be known for. And then our self-compassion, thinking about how to be in relationship with the planet, our carbon footprint, each other, and that authenticity, vulnerability, and joy. So I'm going to stop sharing. Yes, everyone's saying about eating great vegan food. I'm not vegan either, but when I cook vegan, I try to do it as beautifully as I can. So yeah, I wondered if anyone had any comments or questions that they might want to share. Just unmute yourself and say, or you can put it in the chat as well if you'd rather not do that. Give a few more moments in case anyone's thinking. Oh, Kathy, are you talking? Oh, I think you're on mute.
I'm not used to doing it on my phone. I think self-compassion is really key. We have to look after ourselves first and foremost, and that seems selfish, but actually we need to do that in order to care for the planet. If we can't care for ourselves, and think when we need to have time out and when we need to, I'm learning that slowly, about not just about climate guilt, but kind of work guilt and responsibility and things like that. So I think with responsibility comes great, well, the potential for great pain, but I think also great joy if we spend the time being self-compassionate. And I haven't got all the answers. I'm not saying I have. I'm on that journey of trying to look after myself a bit better.
Yeah, I love that, and I think it's so countercultural actually to be compassionate with ourselves. We're allowed guilty pleasures, you know, but and often to pay quite a lot of money for those guilty pleasures, to take time out for ourselves, but actually to acknowledge how hard it is to just be a human, especially living under the conditions that we are. That is super countercultural, and like you say, kind of integral to showing up in the world in the way that we want to, but really hard. Sarah put a comment, it's useful thinking about the fruitlessness of feeling guilt, right? Or the fruitlessness of, you know, getting ensnared in that guilt. You know, it can be a useful signal to us, like, okay, you know, there's something here that's misaligned for me, but it's that ensnaring when we get up in our heads that can just completely immobilize us. And it can really, really fracture relationships. It's so easy because the stakes are so high with climate change that we just, you know, we go from 0 to 100 in terms of the emotional volatility around these discussions. And then it means we can't talk about it and we avoid it like a barge pole. And then we've really got a problem, because we need to be able to talk with each other. Yeah, exactly. Guilt can be useful for inspiring action, but not if it bogs us down and prevents action. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? Yeah.
Yeah, I liked the idea that it was really difficult to instantly change things, and you felt bad about that. But the idea that if you can move in the right direction, just that thought of being able to shift and not go that way, but as long as you're going that way, then you can take a lot of satisfaction and joy from that. I like that idea you're talking about.
Yeah, yes, definitely. Yeah, again, I was having a discussion yesterday. I did a workshop on the difference between healing and fixing, and how fixing is all about just trying to get to a certain point. And if you think about wanting to fix climate change, there's no joy in the getting there. It's just need to get there. Whereas with healing, there's joy along the way as we see, as we engage with the process. And so it's that feeling of like some sustenance on the road, as opposed to it's all on, well, either perfect or it's completely useless from that point. Yeah. Cool.
Can I just add something?
Yeah,
I just did my morning meditation, and I wove in the heart into it, so it's so timely. And the heart, it sends more signals to the brain. You had something about reason, and I'm sorry I missed it, but just to, in case you didn't know, like the heart sends more information to the brain than the brain does to the heart. And so I think that's such a beautiful thing. I mean, the heart can be full of anger and so on too, but isn't it wonderful to be able to tap into that and to allow that to permeate our days? And you talked about coming from joy and love for something. And I listened to a short talk this week, which was all about what did love build? And she gave all these examples of all these super compassionate people, like who have been compassionate towards animals, for example, who are suffering, and who have created these amazing things, these amazing organizations that help animals survive, get them out of suffering circumstances. And so if we approach things that way, I think it's just so much more enlivening. And yeah, I would agree, it's so beautiful to be able to live that way. Love.
I think compassion was missing, like it's in self-compassion, but also that I didn't talk about that compassion for others and how wonderful that can be for our own sense of connection in the world. And just compassion being, we can so easily move from from a place of fear, and what you're talking about is that place of love. And it's like the daily challenge when you're reading all the news headlines and everything that's happened, to move from love rather than fear. Well, it was just a little mini workshop. I had this challenge come up, and I thought, I'm wrestling with this. This is how I'm engaging with it. So I thought I'd share it with others, record it, pop it up on the Facebook group. And so it's just a really large cat walking past my window. It's just caught my attention. But the other thing I was going to say, for you here, but also for anyone watching on the catch up, is in a couple of days' time, I'm going to make an announcement in the Facebook group, which is around a program that I launched this week. It's called The Rest of Activism. And Vivian knows quite a lot about this already, as does Sarah. But it's really aimed at, if we're feeling isolated, or we're feeling overwhelmed, feeling anxious, feeling angry, all of those kinds of emotions, heavy emotions that can come up around climate. It's an opportunity to receive kind of input and tools and meditations like we did today, but also to travel with other people and share this together. So we've got members from all over the world, and all taking this journey together of what does it mean to move from love and to move from a place of joy. Our main kind of question is discovering and restoring joy amid climate sorrow. So I got a grant just very recently to be able to offer the membership. I've been running it for a year for a third of the price than what it was for the first 120 people. So I need to put the link for that in the chat. Sarah, could you pop the link for that in the chat? And I will also put it up with the recording if you're interested in that. But it's £12 a month instead of £35 a month for the first 120 members. It's called The Rest of Activism, and you can take a little look at the web link, which Sarah will drop there, or I'll be posting it in the group as well, hopefully. And then you're all free to head anyway. There it is. So if that looks of interest. And And yeah, I guess as well, I share kind of workshops like this. When you sign up to the membership, there's like 15 hours of workshops like this, all around different topics: boundaries, eco-anxiety, personal resilience, that kind of thing. So yeah, take a look at that if it sounds of interest. And thanks so much for joining, and hopefully see you all again soon. Bye.
Thanks.